to say we go ahead and get started. I'm excited to talk about what we got going tonight. So my name's Abby. I'm a senior here at Bates studying sociology with a minor in education, and my general education concentration is in the knowledge, action, and public good. Tonight, I will be the moderator of this Bobcat chat, which we're focusing on why Bates. So we're going to hear from a lot of different students about why they chose Bates, but we are relying on you guys to use the Q&A function to ask any questions you have. So these might be any last lingering questions, any personal questions, whatever it may be, please send them in the Q&A because we are going to be relying on you guys. We want to hear what sort of questions you have, things that you might be curious about, all the above. I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right into why we chose Bates. Ronan, would you like to start us off?
Of course. So hi, folks. My name is Ronan. I go by he, him, his pronouns. I'm a junior at Bates College, double majoring in environmental studies and sociology. And tonight I will be your other moderator. I'll be working a little bit more behind the scenes today. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat. Even if we don't get to them during the panel, we'll be sure to send along links, information, anything we can give you so that you can feel very confident in your choice whether to come to Bates or not. So please ask all and every question you have, anything lingering. This is an open panel, and we just want to hear from you all. So you can start now with those questions, and welcome to the panel. Super excited.
All right, so to my panelists wants to start off, Isabel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name's Isabel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I am a current junior at Bates, and I am a dance and politics double major and an education studies minor. And I can pass it to Sophie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior from New York City. I'm an environmental studies major and also an education minor. And then my GEC is poverty, inequity, justice. And I'll pass it to Olivia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior originally from Richmond, Virginia, and I'm a theater major with a minor in educational studies, and my GEC is in French and Francophone studies. And I will pass it to Pratyusha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pratyusha. I'm a sophomore. I'm from Westford, Massachusetts, which is like your basic suburb right outside Boston. I'm a politics major and a philosophy minor. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. So like I said, our first question tonight is going to be, so why did you choose Bates? Olivia, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I started like my college process knowing I wanted a small liberal arts school. I wanted the opportunity to study a lot of things. And like I had friends who were interested in theater and were going through like all these auditions and like trying to get into like these really like cutthroat programs. And I knew I didn't really want that. And I wanted the opportunity to do things outside of just the arts, especially because at that point in time, I thought I was going to major in English. And so I visited Bates kind of on a whim. I have family that live in Scarborough, which is right outside of Portland, so like an hour from here. And I was visiting them and we drove up to Bates, and like I really liked it, but I'd seen two other schools that I thought were more things that I wanted. Like one was in a big city. Coming from Richmond, Lewiston seems small. So like I thought maybe I wanted that. And then another had like this like nationally recognized like creative writing program. And I was like, well, maybe I want that. And like the more I kind of sat on it and thought on it, the more I was like, well, at Bates, at the time the requirement was a major +2. And I'm interested in 4 fields of study. So like I can study everything without it being a major stress on my schedule. I can still participate in theater even if I'm not majoring or minoring. Community engagement, that's super cool. I've loved doing that all through high school. None of these other institutions have really talked about that much. And it's in Maine, like one of my favorite places, like right near the beach I've been going to since I was like 2. Like it all kind of like the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, like this is what I want. And like I wasn't able to come back up and visit. Like I was going kind of on like a gut feeling, like I had a good tour, like everyone I'd interacted with was nice, and I just went for it, and it worked out, I would say. um, so yeah, that's kind of my story. I can pass it along, maybe to Isabel.
Yeah, that's awesome, Olivia. So my mom actually went to Bates, and that is not the reason I'm at Bates. I was really reluctant to tour. I did not want, I like look like my mom. I like did not want to go to the same college as her. So I applied to, I think, like 16 schools, regular decision, but mostly like small liberal arts schools on the in the Northeast. And it came down to a couple of things. So I after I got into schools, I narrowed it down to probably about 4 schools I was interested in, and I visited all of them. And I did an overnight at Bates, and I was just like shocked by how nice everybody was. And you will probably hear this from every other panelist as well, but I fell in love with the community at Bates as soon as I got here. Um, my host made so much of an effort to make sure I was like connected to a ton of different people who shared my interest with what I wanted to study. I met a ton of different people involved in the dance community, which is another reason I'm here. The dance community at Bates is wonderful. Um, and it was like little things, like I was sitting at a really busy table at dinner, but like every student who was there like took a second to engage with me, asked where I was from, what I was interested in. And it was just a little stuff like that that happened throughout the night and into the next day at Accepted Students Day that I just really loved being here and being on campus. And the other thing that I really felt from the students, just talking to them, was that Bates is a really collaborative environment, and I can definitely echo this now as at being at Bates. I think that other like small liberal arts schools can be really competitive in nature just because, there's a small acceptance rate and everyone's really, really smart. But I've never felt that at Bates. I've never felt like my peers are competing with me. I've always felt really, really supported in the academic environment. And that was really, really important for me at a school. So yeah, that's my why Bates. And I will send it to Pratyusha.
Yeah, I think for me, I can echo a lot of the things that Isabel was saying about community because, I applied to a lot of liberal arts schools, particularly in the Northeast. And I think it can become really hard to differentiate once you've been on a ton of tours and you've been to a ton of info sessions. Everything kind of sounds exactly the same. And so then you have to sit down and really think, how do I know which school I want to go to? And for me, my admitted students day basically decided that for me because I stepped on campus and the community that you feel it's like very palpable. Like you can't really make that up. You feel that the second you step on campus. And I think like I walked into Commons with a bunch of seniors trying to decide whether they wanted to commit to Bates. And I remember sitting at a table in Commons, which is our dining hall, if you guys don't know. And a bunch of sophomores decided to walk over to our table and they sat down and they struck up a conversation with us and they asked us how our day was going and if we had any questions for them. And I think that really speaks to the character of students here at Bates. And that's something that's really genuine. It's like at the core of a Bates student. And that day I went home and I was like, I'm putting my deposit in, like, this is it. I'm going to Bates because you can't really make up that community. And so that's what really sold me and made me realize this is the liberal arts college for me. And I'll pass it off to Sophie.
Thanks, Pratyusha. Yeah, I also echo a lot of what's already been said. I actually applied to Bates early decision, so I kind of like figured out that it was the place for me earlier on in my college process. But I remember touring Bates and it was like honestly a really rainy, like horrible weather day. It was like pretty cold day in March. But still, like everyone just seemed like so engaged and happy, and that was something that was really important to me. Like I wanted to go to a school that students really like cared about and wanted to be at, and yeah, I found that to be true to this day. And then something else that really attracted me to Bates, like Olivia mentioned, with all of our community engagement programs. And yeah, I feel like I've really had the opportunity to take advantage of that through both the environmental studies major and education minor. And I'm someone who's like much more of a practical learner. So like that type of, the way that Bates like values being able to apply your knowledge into the real world was really appealing to me.
Awesome. Ronan, do you want to say why or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to quickly jump in here. So very similarly to what my fellow panelists said, really has to do with the community aspect of Bates. Something that I was thinking about and that was really important for me wasn't really location, but it was being able to feel comfortable in the location I was at. So I really applied to schools all over the country. Pretty much if there was a school there, I probably applied somewhere in the region. But something about when I came on the Bates campus and just got to see the community, both the Lewiston Auburn community, but also the Bates community itself, I felt very welcomed. And it was just a very homey experience, something that I knew would be super important for me because I have no connections on the East Coast. All my connections are on the West Coast, being from California. So really just that community aspect, plus Bates really is a leader when it comes to community engaged work. And I'm really interested in community work, working within communities, community motivation. So having access to the Harvard Center has been amazing and is something that really attracted me to the school, along with just generally the very generous financial aid that I was provided by Bates College.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I think you guys each hit a different part of about Bates that I think is so special. I also didn't mention I'm from Portland, Maine, so I'm just from 45 minutes outside near Bates. And I think too, like one of the things that I was thinking about is if I wanted to stay close to home or not. And I hate the winter. So for a while I was like, I'm getting away from it, but I ended up staying here in Maine and I've loved my time. I love going off campus and things like that. That leads us to our next question, which is what sort of things do students do off campus? Olivia, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think the main thing like my friends and I will do is go to restaurants and like order takeout. We have so many great restaurants in the area, and like it's really cool because Lewiston, I think in the past, in the past 20 years, there's been a lot of like population and demographic changes within Lewiston. And I think more recently, we've seen a lot of like new businesses and like kind of like this revitalization of like downtown and like Lisbon Street, which is the main drag, which I think is like a 20-ish minute walk from campus. And so there's a lot of like really awesome businesses and restaurants in particular. I love Gritty's, which is a pub just across the river in Auburn. Forage is super popular. They have amazing bagels and good coffee. They're down on Lisbon Street, so they're a little closer. Like Da Vinci's has great pizza. Like my friends and I in non-COVID times would go out like pretty frequently and just hang out, and like it's one of my favorite things to do. Get away from campus for a bit, have some good food, good friends. Sophie, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely echo what you said about all the great restaurant options in Lewiston. But something else I really love about Lewiston is the trails around, like pretty close to campus, all within like walking distance, running, biking distance. There's a path along the Androscoggin River that a lot of Bay students use daily, and then there's Thorn Crag, which is like a little trail system bird sanctuary, about like a 15-minute walk from campus. So I love that we're in this like urban environment in Lewiston, and then there is still like ways to get outdoors without even getting into a car. Yeah, and I'll pass it to Isabel.
Yeah, so a little bit. So Abby mentioned she's from Portland, which is 45 minutes south of Lewiston and Bates. And Portland is the biggest city in Maine and has amazing food. So the food in Lewiston's really good, but the food in Portland is like really, really good. And yeah, so it's a really fun city. You know, if you've got hop in a friend's car, Bates also does shuttles in non-COVID times. And it's a really fun city to explore. A lot of good food. There's also like There's the Portland Museum of Art, which is really cool. There's usually theater going on. So it's just sort of like a really great up and coming city. And yeah, so Portland's definitely one of my favorite places in Maine and close to Bates. And I'm sure Ronan could probably talk about the outdoors a little bit more. But a lot of students in Bates also, there are a bunch of ski hills with, some are a little bit further, about an hour and a half from campus. There's one that's 20 minutes from campus. So a lot of Bates students are really into the outdoors, go skiing and snowboarding, like in the winter, like almost every weekend. So I'll pass it over to Ronan to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So we are in the beautiful state of Maine. I think something that is great about being in the Lewiston Auburn area is we are close to mountains, we're close to the coast, we're close to beautiful cities. And if you're feeling really adventurous, Batesies will go out to Vermont, New Hampshire, they'll head down to Boston. Lots of options for students. But when it comes to the outdoors specifically, Maine is just a gorgeous state. As Sophie was talking about, we have plenty of beautiful trail networks within the Lewiston Auburn area. Some that pop into my mind are the Riverwalk, for example, which many Batesies love to go on runs on, Thorn Crag, which is a beautiful way to escape from campus and literally just 5 minutes from it. But as you go further beyond Bates, there are so many hikes and activities that students love to enjoy, whether it be going down to Salt Pump and going to the climbing gym there, heading to Pompton Beach to have a barbecue, hang out with some friends. If you're feeling extra adventurous, you can head to Acadia for the weekend. We have Katahdin also, which is the largest mountain in Maine, and also the end of the Appalachian Trail if you're interested in that. So plenty of options there. What's great about Bates too is we have 2 outdoor programs which really focus on allowing access to these spaces and providing the gear so that you can do that. I won't go too much into that so that we can answer other questions, but essentially we have our annual entering student outdoor program, which is a trip that all first-year students will go on. And then we have the Bates Outing Club, which focuses more on kind of year-round trip options.
Awesome. Thank you guys. So moving on to a different sort of question, just because more questions are coming in and I want to have enough time to answer all of them. Isabel, you're a politics major, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So can you speak about some of the politics as a major and also on campus, the political involvement there?
Yeah, totally. So the politics majors has 5 different tracks in it. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure, I guess, depending on what you want to study within the major. It's a really big major, probably top 5 on campus, I would say. So I'm more US politics based. So I'm in the institutional politics track. And it really is just a very like broad array of things. The professors, I think, particularly in the politics department, are why I chose to be a politics major. They're all just really wonderful. I feel like they all have really specific interests and what they research is really interesting. So that was sort of why I was drawn to the major. I can also pass it over to Pratyusha to talk about her experience as a politics major. But it is very much like what you are interested in, you get to study within the major. There's like hundreds of classes basically. And yeah.
Yeah, my concentration, I feel like it's really easy to sort of find your way into what particular aspect of politics interests you, just because you get drawn to sort of the same professors over and over, and those professors generally fall into some particular concentration. So I just sort of found myself in the political economy concentration just because I loved certain professors and like really had a great time in certain classes. So yeah, it's a, like Isabel was saying, it's a very large encompassing major. But also to answer sort of the second half of your question, in terms of the political involvement on campus, I think that's actually another huge draw to Bates, honestly. The students here care a lot about a lot of different things. And I think people are not afraid of being vocal about the things that they're really interested in. And, whether that's in reference to Bates as an entity or even further, like I remember last year, there were a ton of buses to a climate march. There are tons of protests and marches and all sorts of events happening. So it's really not only easy to get involved in any sort of political protests or political sort of agenda in a way, but not only that, there's a lot to learn. I think I certainly grew a lot in terms of what I believe politically. So yeah, there's a really great atmosphere in terms of political involvement on campus.
Awesome, thank you. And while we're on the topic of majors, someone had a question about the environmental science major. Can you talk a little bit about that, Sophie?
Sure. So the environmental studies major is very interdisciplinary. There are 4 different tracks you can choose from. So there's more of like a natural science track, there's an economics track, there's a humanities track, and then I do the social science track, which is called global environmental politics. So like just right away, there's like a lot of different options just within the major, and like people really are able to specialize in what is most interesting to them. I'm really interested in environmental justice and specifically like environmental studies within urban communities, which I think is not necessarily what people like associate ES with. But yeah, I found that there are incredible professors in the department. Similar to politics, I think you do end up taking classes with the professors who you're really drawn to, like based on their research and what they tend to teach their classes on. But yeah, no, it's a great program. It also has a required capstone class along with a thesis where you do a community engaged project in Lewiston. So I had the opportunity to work with someone who's heavily involved in like the affordable housing field in Lewiston and was working on like a database to rank rental properties in Lewiston for how safe they were in terms of environmental health. So that was a really cool experience. I don't know if Ronan wants to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great summary of the major and what I would really highlight. I'm right now actually in Enviro for 17, which is that community engaged course, and I'm loving it. I'm doing a project with LA Arts, which is not Los Angeles Arts, but instead the Lewiston Opera Arts. So if you ever hear someone saying East LA or anything of that nature, they're referring to the Lewiston Opera area. We like to think it's the better LA, but if you're, depending on where you're from, California, you might have different opinions, no worries. But back on topic, something about the ES major I've really loved is its interdisciplinary nature. I have counted it, and I'm almost certain I've taken something like 5 classes in 5 or 6 different disciplines just to complete my major. And I'm excited that next year I'm actually going to be taking a class or 2 in the politics department, which I haven't been able to do yet. But since ES is interdisciplinary by nature, you really get the opportunity to just explore a bunch and really take on what it means to get a liberal arts education. So I cannot recommend the sorry, losing my my voice a little bit. But yeah, I highly recommend the ES department. It's a great department. There's a lot of options and is really one of my favorite things about being at Bates.
Great, thank you. Those are 2 very nice answers to that question, so I appreciate it. So our next question is, how do you feel about the low ethnic diversity rates at Bates? Is it difficult for students of color to find POC communities at Bates?
I can take that, I guess. I think, so in terms of how accessible certain groups are, I think, at least personally, I'm part of a lot of identity groups just because back home, I'm Indian, both my parents are Indian. And so I grew up, really surrounded by a lot of Indians in my community. And I got very comfortable with being surrounded by a lot of Indians. And so coming to Bates and not having that large of a community was definitely a massive change for me. But I think joining joining certain identity groups, joining Bollywood dance, joining Indian classical dance has been really amazing in not only creating lots of long-term friendships, but also finding places that I feel really, really comfortable on campus. So while I do think that, Bates definitely has a lot of work to do in terms of including a lot more of varying ethnicities and varying groups of individuals, I think there's something to be said of the work that's being done currently in regards to diversity and inclusion. That by no means is sort of an excuse for anything going on at Bates, but I think it's a step forward. And I think more than anything, like I touched on earlier, the student voices are really, really awesome to hear, especially, you hear things in the Bates Student, which is our student newspaper. My roommate is part of newspaper, so her and a lot of people on newspaper do a great job of reaching out to, underrepresented and minority voices. So just in general, I think sort of the student push towards diversity, inclusion, and sort of giving people of color a voice is really awesome to see. I hope I touched on some sort of answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. And I think something too that's important to mention is that like all of our student organizations are open to everyone. And we're really inclusive, and like there's work to be done for sure, but we're inclusive to all when thinking about student organizations and clubs on campuses, as well as majors. We don't have any fraternities or sororities, which I think really harps again on this idea that we're all sort of accepting. And I always say that you can sort of be whoever you want to be on campus, and people are going to accept you, and there's that sort of nature on campus. Yeah, so thank you for that. I think that was a really well answered question. So the next question is specifically for students coming from outside the Northeast, the students from California, how was it acclimating to the Maine/area around Bates?
Since you mentioned California, I'm happy to start this off and then people can hop in as needed. So I'm specifically from the Bay Area, so pretty used to temperate weather, 50s, 70s, maybe if it's a cold day, you might get it down to 35 or something. I know all the people from the Northeast are laughing at me right now, but it's okay, it's okay. But one thing I was a bit surprised about actually is how much I enjoying seasons. I don't know where you're from in California, but you're probably used to the fact that we kind of have two seasons in California. We either have rain or we have sun. It's amazing to be in the Northeast during the fall, especially in the winter. Oh my God. Never have I seen such an explosion of color. It was an amazing experience. My first time I was here, I have this memory of it's like during one of the breaks or something, I was just running around like grabbing leaves, seeing what was going on there. And it was a pretty amazing experience just to see that for the first time. Also seeing snow fall for the first time was another amazing experience. So while I will admit, it does get a little colder than I might like at times. And one thing to keep in mind is that the snow is going to stick around for a little bit. The snow kind of sticks on the ground from like November to March, and then it will start to kind of go through cycles of melting and coming back. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're not used to snow, make sure to get yourself a good pair of boots. Don't wear Converse like I did my whole first year. You'll have a lot of wet feet, but if you dress for the weather, it's really not going to be that big of a deal when it comes to the cold and such. And it can actually be a really enjoyable time too, and a really fun and new experience. So that was sort of my experience, at least seasonally. Obviously, there's some cultural differences too, which we don't have to get into now, but I find Bates to actually have a very West Coast vibe to it when it comes to the students, which might mean something to you. So that's just something else to consider.
I will echo everything Ronan said. Being from Virginia, New England falls are gorgeous. Was not expecting snow to be around this long. My philosophy is it's better to look like an idiot bundled up in like a giant jacket and a hat and a scarf and gloves and all of it than to be cold. So get a good jacket. Gloves are a life changer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I am from Maine, like I said, but the winter still shocks me every year. I think too is one thing that I always like to tell students is that Bates like teaches us to penguin walk. So it's this sort of like waddle that they like sometimes after a really bad snowstorm, they'll email us and be like, all right, like bring the penguin walk out, just because, sometimes it can be slippery out there. That's like one of my favorite memories. And then while it is really cold, like we do have really fun traditions out in the snow, like winter carnival and puddle jump. which if you guys want to know more about, please do ask in the Q&A. But there are fun things like that isn't necessarily a huge, like, fun winter thing originally, I thought, but at Bates, people make it really fun. So it's really enjoyable. So the next question is, what is one thing you wish you could change about Bates? We just love Bates so much we can't even come up with something that we want to change. I can go first. I think that I love our food at Bates College, and our food is nationally recognized for being so good. But I think that I would like, specifically right now, like a bigger food rotation. So right now we're on like a 2 or 3 week rotation. So, you know, chicken nuggets used to be like every other Tuesday. Now they're every Tuesday, which is awesome and no problem there. But I wish there was sometimes like a bigger rotation so those meals were still exciting. And I think that's COVID wise a little bit too, and just kind of what they can get in and out of Commons. But that's sort of I think there's other things that can be changed, but when I come to mind thinking about it, like socially and like food wise and things like that, that's one thing. Yeah. Does anyone have something else? Yeah, Isabel.
And I think Bates is getting better with this, and it's been a challenge this year, but I wish there was a little bit more communication at times between administration at Bates and the students. And this is probably true at every single institution, I feel like. But especially this year, there's obviously a lot of things that are rapidly changing, and I think if there was just a little bit more, like, telling us almost play by plays of what is actually going on in certain scenarios, everybody would be a little bit less stressed out. But that's also, I think, the nature of being at school in a pandemic. So, but I think generally, and I do think Bates is getting better about this, and there's been a lot of learning this year, but I wish there was a little bit more, I guess, transparency.
Any last lingering thoughts?
This is really small, but I kind of wish we didn't have to pay for laundry. Like, I've been meaning to reload my laundry card for legitimately a week now. Like, it's just like another thing to think about, and also like it's it's like $3 to do a load of laundry, and sometimes that really adds up. So, yeah. But we don't have to pay for printing, which is great because I would much rather pay like a flat, easy $3 than like 12 cents a page or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Olivia. Yeah, so it's $1.50 and then $1.50. So maybe you don't don't dry your clothes, maybe you air dry them, then it's only $1.50. There's ways to save here, but it definitely depends. Sophie, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was actually thinking similarly to what Isabel said about communication between administration and students, but I don't think that's a unique issue. And like you said, it's definitely getting better. Another really small thing is just that the library doesn't open until 10 a.m. on Sundays, and I wake up really early. So I don't think it would make a big difference for most people. Like if it opened at 9, it would for me, but that's okay. You can go to PGIL, which is open 24 hours, and that's another really great study space.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys. We all had different unique answers, which I think are all kind of true. So the next question is, how do we feel about the Bates campus? I think this is a pretty general question. Does anyone want to start us off?
Yeah, I can start. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'm from a suburb. So there's really nothing that's walking distance for me except houses and like neighbors. So I really love the campus because everything is basically a 10-minute walk maximum. So I would say, from the furthest side on Fry Street to Merrill Gymnasium is a maximum of 10 minutes. And I love that because I can see buildings, I can see people. There is so many things to walk to that are like a couple minutes away from me. And I've never really had the opportunity to experience that. The closest thing to my house was a Dunkin' Donuts that's a mile away. So even speaking of, things off campus, it's very easy to get to things off campus. So just generally, the fact that you can just walk places so easily is really, really nice. And I also love, this is kind of small, but I love the buildings. The design of the buildings is just so beautiful. And the quad in the fall, I feel like we've mentioned this, but it's so beautiful. And so seeing sort of the bricks and all of the fall colors is really awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, for the interest of time, we're gonna keep answering more questions so we can get to more. But again, you can reach out via the Den, as well as the Ask a Student page, especially if you want to ask any of us, and we can also drop our emails below at the end. So the next question is, does campus feel at all dead during the winter?
So, like, I think mood is definitely a little lower in the winter, but like Bates doesn't stop. Like, winter carnival happens like right around midterms in February. So, like, the point when it's cold and dark and snowy, but then you have like this great fun week with like late night breakfast and like the Lost Valley takeover and puddle jump. And it's this nice like boost of energy to get you through the end of the semester. And like people will go like skating and like play hockey on the pond, and like you'll sometimes see like snowmen on the quad. Like people still do things. We have a lot of like, I think 90s dance normally falls kind of in like February, January. Gala falls in March as like things are starting to change. So like a lot of stuff is still going on, and you'll still see people like kind of walking around and occasionally like hanging out. But I would say mood is a little lower because the sun sets really early, and sometimes that's just hard.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. All right. This is one of my favorite questions. What are some favorite campus traditions here at Bates? Who wants to snag it? Isabel?
Yeah, so Olivia just mentioned Lost Valley Takeover, so it comes at the end of our winter carnival, usually on a Saturday evening. So there's a ski hill that's about 20 minutes from campus called Lost Valley, and Bates takes it over for an evening, and we get free skiing, snowboarding, and tubing all night, and free rentals for everything. And then there's also a lodge at the ski hill, and student bands play throughout the night, and there's good food and hot cocoa, and it's just like really, really fun vibes, I guess, is how I would describe it. It's been one of my favorite experiences or traditions at Bates the last 3 years. We were even able to do it socially distant this year, which was really, really wonderful and like meant a lot to me personally. It was actually really fun this year because usually it's like really, really crowded, and it wasn't because it wasn't allowed to be. So you were able to like usually you get like 3 like passes down the tubing hill. I probably tubed 15 times this year. So it was a really good time, and yeah. Does anybody else want to talk about a tradition?
Yeah, I really love Harvest Dinner in like a really, I don't know why it is so phenomenal to me, but there's something. So Harvest Dinner happens around Thanksgiving, right before we go home. And basically it's like this massive feast in Commons, and a lot of people from the Lewiston Auburn area will also come. They'll buy tickets and come to Harvest Dinner. And people would tell me that, okay, it was my freshman year that I did this, so people would tell me you have to line up outside Commons at like 3 p.m. and I didn't believe them. And so I realized that it's this huge thing, and I had to like snag a table because there's bands playing, and the vibes are just immaculate in a way that I can't describe. And the food is amazing. And it's just like you feel everyone's happiness all at the same time. And it's so much fun. I love Harvest Dinner.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I also love Harvest Dinner. People always get excited for the lobster mac and cheese, especially. Not a huge lobster goer myself, which people hate when I say that because I'm from Maine, but it is very creamy and rich, and it does look good. So we are at the 5-minute mark. So we have 5 more minutes left. So we have 2 last lingering questions we'll get to. And again, then we'll leave our emails in the chat, reach out to us via the Den or Ask a Student page. So our second to last question is, what has your experience with housing been like? And if someone wants to kind of give like a brief like housing intro for first years, that would also be cool.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. So one thing that I love about housing at Bates is that all first years like live in either a dorm or a house surrounded by other rooms of first year. So that's a really great way to meet people, like usually like from many different places, different interests right off the bat, like as soon as you get to Bates. And we have a lot of different housing options. My first year at Bates, I lived in 2 Hall, which is one of the newest dorms on campus. So that was really nice, like great shower pressure in the bathrooms and a lot of fun common spaces to hang out in. And then I was actually like a JA the next year. So I lived in Page Hall, which is a dorm that's mainly first years, but there are a lot of different options. Sophomore year, it's common for people to live on Fry Street in houses that Bates has turned into dorm rooms. So that's a really fun place too. There are also some different theme house options you can apply to have a theme house, and then you like go through a selection process to choose who's in your house. I know there's been social justice theme houses and like environmental action, music house. Those are just some of the options. Yeah, if anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, one thing I'll add too is that all first years are randomly placed with roommates. And I love that Bates does this because it really encourages students to, randomly room with someone. So you'll fill out a survey your first year, like the summer before going into first year. And it'll just be like simple questions like, do you sleep in a cold room, hot room? What time do you go to bed? Things like that. And I always encourage students to fill that out quite honestly, because I think Bates does a pretty good job matching students. And again, it is random. So, I've only heard of a few stories where roommates don't work out and then you just talk to your J or whatever it might be. But for the most part, they work out. And I still talk to my first year roommate to this day, even as a senior. So Bates does a really nice job with that. So we have 2 more questions because another one just came in, but we'll just do one more depending on time. And that question is, how easy is the gym access on campus and what is the weight room like? And I'll just say, in the previous years, you used to be able to just go to the gym whenever you wanted, and now you have to sign up. And I love that they're doing this sign up system because 4 p.m. gym times were so busy. And now it's like, only 12 people in the cardio room, or like it's smaller numbers because of socially distancing. And I really prefer that. I'm sure Isabel can touch more about it because she does work at the gym as well. But if anyone has anything else to add.
Yeah, I would just add that like Abby said, all the facilities are open to everyone. There's obviously like times that teams practice, but that doesn't even inhibit other students from using the facilities at that time. There's also a lot of different programs to, especially like for women, there's like a group of women that like works out in the weight room together to like support women learning how to use weights and that kind of stuff. So there's a ton of different programming within the gym. If you've like never been a gym goer, there's totally ways to get into it. And I think the facilities are great for the most part. They're a little bit far from campus. They're like Pratyusha said, they're like probably one of the furthest spots on campus. But yeah, I generally think the space is pretty accessible to everybody, and that people don't feel uncomfortable using any of the facilities.
And then one other quick thing too is Isabel sort of mentioned this, but we also have a program called Be Well. So it used to be like our physical education requirement because some of us had an ed requirement, and now there isn't a phys ed requirement. So you can just kind of work out when you want to, and there's no requirement for that. But Be Well does host programs. Some have been in person this year as well as virtual. So there's like yoga, boot camp, just like a wide variety of them. And actually my sociology professor and I always go to the same boot camp class. So that's a nice way to create a relationship outside of the classroom with the professors, to see them at boot camp or see them at yoga, whatever it might be. Again, I think it's really cool that Bates does classes with both students and professors, and that kind of goes and shows the community aspect we have. So it is 7:45, so that is the end of the panel. I'll have my panelists drop their emails in the chat. So if you do have any other further questions, please be sure to reach out. Also reach out in the den. And I hope you guys have a great night. Thank you so much for joining.